On a cold Maundy Thursday in Oslo, Mikael Betju, a former Nokas robber and key figure in Norway's underworld, was found dead in a wooded area at Oppsal. The spot was unsettlingly ordinary, a small forest grove tucked between apartment buildings, crisscrossed by trails used by dog walkers and children. But what police discovered there was anything but ordinary. Betju had been ambushed, executed, and left behind in a state that one officer described as extremely brutal. Though officially listed as a shooting, the condition of the body suggested a far more disturbing end, the kind designed to send a message. It didn't take long for investigators to name a suspect. Within days, they turned their attention to Stig Millehauen, the man long labelled Norway's most dangerous. Even more shocking, Millehauen wasn't supposed to be on the street at all. He was serving a 21-year sentence for murder and had been granted a short prison furlough. Authorities now believe he used that window of freedom to carry out a contract killing in the heart of Oslo. The manhunt was fast and targeted. On Easter Sunday, heavily armed police stormed a quiet address in Horten and arrested Millehauen as he sat inside a parked car. For Norway, it was a moment of déjà vu. A career criminal who had spent more than half his life behind bars was once again suspected of striking during a brief taste of freedom. Prosecutors alleged the motive was a gangland dispute. Old debts, missing money, or quiet scores finally called in. In a grim twist, Betju had been one of the people Millehauen interviewed for a book he was writing in prison. Whether that meeting was innocent research or calculated scouting is something only Millehauen could answer. He denies everything, claims he's being framed. But a judge has placed him in full isolation, citing the severity of the crime and the high risk of tampering with evidence. Norway had gambled on the idea that even its most dangerous man could be trusted with a few hours of freedom. Instead, it's now facing the cost of that trust and preparing to reckon with what Millehauen still represents. The most dangerous man in Norway. Who is Stig Millehauen, and how did he earn the title Norway's most dangerous man? For over 36 years he's been in and out of prison, though mostly in, surfacing only during violent escapes or high-stakes crimes. Now 55, Millehauen has spent most of his life behind bars. His criminal record reads like a blueprint of Norway's most serious offences: armed robberies, hostage-takings, prison breaks, and contract killings. Time and again, he's proven capable of extreme violence and exceptional cunning. The label isn't just media hype. Millehauen is one of the few in Norway sentenced to forvaring, a form of preventive detention with no fixed end. In 2012, he received 21 years with a 10-year minimum, the harshest penalty Norwegian law allows. Authorities signaled he may never be released. At times, he was the only inmate held under Norway's highest security level, aside from terrorist Anders Behring Breivik. Complete isolation, no contact, and constant surveillance. His imprisonment alone has cost the state over 50 million kroner in total, due to the extraordinary security required to keep him contained. His reputation stems not only from what he's done, but how he's done it. Millehauen has escaped multiple times, manipulated the system, and outwitted guards and judges alike. Even behind locked doors, he was always planning his next move. But he didn't come from chaos. Born in 1969, Millehauen grew up in a stable home in Oslo. "I had good parents, great siblings," he once said. "There were no social conditions that caused me to do what I did." By his teens, however, he was restless and drawn to trouble, a self-described rabagast rascal. He ran with the Tveita gang, a notorious crew of young delinquents on Oslo's east side. At 17, he was arrested for the first time after buying a stolen jacket. Soon he was stealing cars, breaking into shops, and joyriding without a license. "We stole cars and did break-ins, that kind of thing," he later said. It wasn't about survival, it was about rebellion, the thrill of doing what he wasn't supposed to. By 20, Milahauen had several convictions and was already slipping beyond the reach of social services. In a city where organized crime was beginning to take root, he found his place. The petty crimes of his youth were over. Stig Milahauen was about to go pro. Oslo's underworld. Rise through the ranks. Milahauen entered the 1990s hungry for bigger scores. In his early 20s, he set his sights on the most lucrative targets of the day: banks and post offices, handling large amounts of cash. Armed robbery became his specialty, and he wasted no time making a name for himself. In December 1990, at the age of 21, Stig walked into the post office in Klemetsrud, Oslo, wielding a weapon and demanding money. It was a bold move, but he pulled it off. 2 months later, in February 1991, he struck again, this time robbing a branch of Sparebanken NOR in the Oppsal neighborhood. The young robber didn't flinch at using violence. He carried a powerful revolver loaded with hollow-point bullets, and during these early holdups he actually fired shots that whizzed dangerously close to bystanders. It was only by sheer luck that no one was hit. The message was clear. Milahauen was willing to shoot, and innocent people could easily have died. Police scrambled to track down this brazen thief prowling Oslo's banks. It took months, but Milahauen was eventually caught. In February 1992, he was convicted for the armed heists at Klemetsrud and Oppsal and sentenced to 6 years in prison. At just 22 years old, he was locked up for what should have been the rest of his youth. By then, Milahauen's underworld resume was gaining heft. He had been a key member of the Tveita gang, run with neo-Nazis in prison alliances, and proven he wouldn't hesitate to pull the trigger. The courts noted how, in both cases of aggravated robbery, shots were fired that passed close to the nearest person, a hair's breadth from murder. Still, 6 years behind bars might have changed the trajectory of a lesser criminal. But for Stig Milahauen, prison was not the end. It was an opportunity. Behind bars, he honed new connections and schemes. In the summer of 1992, after only a few months of serving his sentence, he seized his chance to solidify his underworld reputation. A storm was brewing within the prison walls, and soon all of Norway would come to know Milahauen's name. In 1992, Stig Milahauen committed the act that would define his reputation for decades. He killed a prison officer in cold blood during a meticulously planned escape. That July, while serving time for armed robbery, he broke out of Bag Kretsfengsel in Tansberg. Over the next few weeks, he and an accomplice robbed 2 post offices, at Svartskog and Nesbru, and took hostages during their getaway. He was recaptured by the end of August and placed in custody at Sarpsborg prison. But Milahauen wasn't done. He would later say the motive behind it all was simple. He hadn't had a summer on the outside since 1987. By December, he had managed to have a loaded pistol smuggled into his cell. A feat that showed both the reach of his network and the depth of his planning. On the day of his escape, under the pretense of needing the bathroom, he convinced a guard to open his cell. Then he shot him in the chest at close range. The officer, 34-year-old John Arild Martensen, collapsed on the spot. Milahauen then grabbed a second guard as a hostage, forced him to handcuff other staff members, and ordered him to drive out of the facility, all while refusing to let anyone help the dying man behind them. The hostage drove him from Sarpsborg to Oslo. Once there, Milahauen carjacked another vehicle, released the guard and disappeared. But the flight didn't last long. The very next day, he contacted his lawyer and surrendered, a move that felt calculated, as if to prove he could come and go as he pleased. The murder shocked the nation. A prison officer being gunned down by an inmate was nearly unheard of in Norway. At just 23, Milahauen had demonstrated a level of violence, composure, and tactical control that deeply unsettled the public and the justice system alike. In August 1993, he was convicted of the murder, along with the armed robberies and hostage-taking. He received 17 years in prison, one of the harshest sentences available at the time. But if the court hoped this would mark the end of his reign, they were wrong. Stig Møllehaugen was just getting started. The Great Escapes. If Stig Møllehaugen proved anything, it was that no prison could hold him for long. His bloody 1992 escape made headlines, but later breakouts, though less violent, cemented his status as Norway's most elusive inmate. Time and again he treated prison walls like suggestions, slipping past them whenever the chance arose. The next major escape came in October 2000. After serving 7 years of a 17-year sentence, Møllehaugen was granted a 6-hour leave from Ullersmo prison, a decision officials would quickly regret. He disappeared and triggered a nationwide manhunt. For 8 months he remained on the run, the longest he'd been free since his teens. Rumors suggested he had fled abroad, and police suspected he was involved in a Christmas 2000 armed robbery at a Kreditkassenbank in Oslo's Bogstadveien, where shots were fired and staff terrorized. Møllehaugen was arrested in June 2001 without incident, but in court he was acquitted of the robbery due to lack of evidence. Still, he was sentenced to 1 additional year for carrying loaded weapons while at large. A minor punishment, but a reminder of how disruptive even his freedom was. Authorities, now fully alarmed, tightened security. He was sent to Skien prison, but in October 2001 a group of accomplices tried to free him using a 15-ton bulldozer, crashing through the prison gate. The breakout failed, but police found letters and intelligence linking Møllehaugen to the plan. He was immediately transferred to Ringerike prison and placed under SHS, Norway's highest level of prison security. At Ringerike's Unit A, Møllehaugen spent years in near total isolation, with strict controls on contact and movement. He sued the state in 2002, claiming the conditions were inhumane. In response, the court cited his detailed escape planning, noting he was prepared to take a gap year abroad and return when caught, aware of the consequences. By the mid-2000s, he had become a kind of folk anti-hero, the criminal who always found a way out. But as his legend grew, so did the danger. A new chapter of violence was just ahead, one that would tie him to Norway's criminal underworld once again, and end in another murder conviction. The Gangland murder and the Nokas web. By the late 2000s, Oslo's gang conflicts had grown increasingly violent. 2 rival groups, the A-Gjengen and B-Gjengen, battled for control of the drug trade, with splinter crews like the Young Guns caught in the crossfire. One of those caught was Mohammed Jedi Javed, a 28-year-old gang leader marked for death. On a cold January night in 2009, Javed got into a car in Haigeru, expecting to discuss a robbery. He sat in the passenger seat. His associate Alex was driving. In the back seat sat Stig Møllehaugen. At the time, Møllehaugen was not in prison or on leave. He had completed a previous sentence and was living freely. As the car rolled through a quiet neighborhood, Møllehaugen drew a pistol and fired a single shot into the back of Javed's head. It was a swift execution. The gun jammed when Møllehaugen tried to shoot the driver next. Alex fled, running to a nearby gas station to alert police. Meanwhile, Møllehaugen took the wheel, drove the car to a remote spot, and set it on fire with Javed's body still inside. Investigators quickly traced the crime back to him through witness testimony and surveillance footage. He was arrested within days. Prosecutors revealed that Møllehaugen had been paid to carry out the hit, a contract killing ordered by a rival gang figure. The job was calculated and clinical, Møllehaugen treating murder as business. In 2012, he was sentenced to 21 years of forvaring, Norway's harshest form of preventative detention. Another man involved received 20 years. The hit tied Møllehaugen deeper into Oslo's criminal underworld, which increasingly overlapped with the circle of figures involved in the infamous Nokas robbery of 2004. Inside the Walls, Ila and Halden. After the 2009 murder conviction, Stig Millehauen once again became a long-term fixture in Norway's prison system. Over the years, he passed through nearly every high-security facility, from Ila to the modern Halden prison, a place dubbed the most humane maximum-security prison in the world. Despite his violent past, Millehauen spent periods in isolation under the country's strictest conditions, at times rivaling those imposed on terrorist inmates. Yet Norway's prisons also offered rehabilitation. By the 2010s, Millehauen turned inward. He briefly changed his last name, started studying, and began writing. In 2023, he released a memoir titled Gjerningsmann, Perpetrator, openly admitting to crimes, including an unsolved NOK 30 million robbery, and expressing regret over the pain he caused his family. He also began work on a second book, exploring Norway's criminal underworld. For that, he interviewed several known criminals, including Metkel Betju. By 2021, having served the minimum 10 years of his forvering sentence, Norway's harshest form of preventative detention, which has no fixed end date, Millehauen was seeking parole. Forvering is reserved for the most dangerous offenders, allowing courts to extend imprisonment indefinitely if the person is still considered a threat to society. Some prison staff noted improvements in his behavior. Others warned he was simply playing the long game. Either way, it was clear Millehauen hadn't been broken by prison. If anything, he was preparing for what the system would soon find out. The 2022 escape and nationwide manhunt. On the morning of June 1, 2022, officials at Trondheim prison discovered Stig Millehauen was missing. He'd been granted a short supervised furlough and never returned. Once again, the double murder convict was loose, and Norway held its breath. The response was immediate. Police issued a nationwide alert, plastering Millehauen's photo across the media. The 53-year-old is considered one of Norway's most dangerous people, headlines warned. The public was told not to approach him, only to call emergency services. Authorities knew this wasn't a man to gamble with. As one police inspector put it, he is dangerous. What Millehauen did next showed his signature blend of boldness and planning. A contact had pre-booked an airline ticket. He boarded a flight from Trondheim to Oslo under a false name. Surveillance footage later caught him at Oslo airport, then calmly stepping into a taxi bound for Oslo Central Station, where he vanished into the crowd. For a full week, Millehauen remained missing. Rumors suggested he'd fled to Sweden. Police chased leads, even raiding a location across the border. CCTV showed him at Oslo S with a backpack, looking like just another traveler. But investigators had a hunch. Millehauen had a history of hiding in nature. That theory paid off. On June 8th, officers found him walking along a road in Østmarka, a forested area outside Oslo. He'd been camping out in a tent. When confronted, he gave up peacefully. He just came walking along the road, a senior officer said, still surprised. Though bloodless, the escape triggered a wave of outrage. How could someone with Millehauen's record be allowed outside prison at all? The incident reignited debate over Norway's furlough system, a key part of its rehabilitative model. Critics were blunt. He still takes the opportunity to commit serious crimes when he's on parole. The consequences came quickly. Millehauen received an extra 6 months for the escape. More importantly, he lost all future leave privileges. When he later applied for parole, the 2022 escape was central to the court's rejection. In January 2024, the Borgarting Court of Appeal denied his request, stating plainly, the conditions for release weren't met. That week-long escape reminded Norwegians of exactly who Millehauen was. And while this manhunt ended quietly, another crisis was already forming. Criminal myth or calculated monster? Over time, Stig Millehauen became more than a criminal. He became a legend. Nicknamed Heimarkongen and dubbed Norway's prison Houdini, he was seen as a cold, calculating outlaw. But beyond the headlines, a more complex picture emerges. Veteran police officer Johnny Brenner described him as dangerous within the criminal world, but not a threat to ordinary people. Milehauen's violence was deliberate, aimed at rivals, obstacles, or hired targets, never random. Psychologists noted his lack of remorse and emotional detachment. He once said, thinking about the victims was not even a topic. You just go for it. But his violence was rarely chaotic. He treated crime like a profession, taking pride in his planning and execution. Robbery was a profession for me, he wrote. In prison, he could be polite, low-key, even charming. He followed rules until it suited him not to. That duality added to his mystique. Part career criminal, part master manipulator. Milehauen has tried to reshape his legacy through writing, claiming he's more than just a robber and killer. Whether that's true remorse or self-preservation is unclear. To some, he remains a monster. To others, a disciplined and dangerous tactician. In either case, the myth of Stig Milehauen has had real consequences. For his victims, for the justice system, and for a country that keeps learning the cost of underestimating him. At his core, Milehauen seemed driven by two things: power and freedom. Power to control any room he walked into, and freedom at any cost. Even if chasing it guaranteed he'd lose it again. The irony is brutal. In trying to be untouchable, he made sure he'd never truly be free. He is a man of contradictions. Intelligent but reckless, ruthless yet composed, desperate for liberty, yet forever behind locked doors. In the end, his motives may be common: greed, pride, fear, but pursued with uncommon relentlessness. That's what makes him so dangerous. We return to where the story began, the murder of Metkel Betju, and the question it forced onto Norway's justice system. Can Stig Milehauen ever be trusted again? As of now, he sits in Oslo County Jail under maximum isolation, awaiting trial. If convicted, he'll face a new forvaringsdom, a sentence that can be extended indefinitely. Given his history, repeated violence after release, it's likely he'll never walk free again. In 2024, he was already denied parole for being too dangerous. Still, he got a short-term furlough, possibly leading to the end of Metkel Betju. Norway prides itself on rehabilitation, but Milehauen has tested that ideal at every turn. He's been given therapy, education, even time outside, and each time someone ends up hurt or dead. Calls to reform leave policies and tighten rules around high-risk inmates grew louder after his 2022 escape. Betju's murder poured fuel on that fire. It's hard to ignore the symmetry. In 1992, Milehauen killed a prison officer and was locked up for 17 years. He got out, killed again in 2009, and was sentenced to 21 more. Then came Betju, executed during yet another moment of temporary freedom. Milehauen once said he didn't want to be remembered only as a robber and killer. But if he did play a role in Betju's death, it suggests old habits or old loyalties never really left him. Today, the forest at Oppsal where Betju's body was found has returned to quiet, but its impact endures. In seeking justice for one criminal, Norway may have finally found the answer to what to do with another: contain him permanently.